International University. First of all, good morning to all of you. The truth of the matter is that I'm going to speak about knowledge management, and I have been listening very attentively the person that spoke before me, and it's marvelous because I'm a great defender of European convergence and the convergence of Europe and the world. The truth is that it's moving slower than we expect, and it's something that we have set aside without taking good consideration of what universities are all about, because in the systems where we should innovate, we're very slow in innovating. And what we usually say is, why don't we put what we had there 40 years ago? And that sounds perfect. So you always want to move backwards as an innovative method, and this method is useless. Well, to begin with, I wanted to tell you something important. I had a lengthy presentation, but I'm not going to read it. You're going to have it available to you and you can take a look at it. But what I think is important is to deal with a few points, and I wanted to tell you right at the start. I have begun with this. I am a university professor, and I have the idea that if we're talking about knowledge, we should speak about what knowledge is in itself. There are many thinkers that have spoken about this. What is understood as knowledge management, and I was lucky to find something that was prepared in PowerPoint in the network that I'm going to show to you. But everything that you see is with undertitles so that you can read it if you want. That's one thing. The other important thing is what we do at university level, and the first slide says, well, they're asking us for everything. They said the university will have something to say about production. By means of education and training, we're talking about transmission. Through technologies and information communication, we are doing dissemination, and through technological innovation, we're affecting the economy and exploitation. So I have taken some worldwide indicators on training. What is training and innovation? And this is basically 30% of worldwide indicators of economic growth. Therefore, this is rather exclusive, but there are other things, and therefore we must be very important. And we're not aware of that. I think that the professor that is teaching every day is not conscious that what he's doing is so important. I would like to speak a little bit about innovation, the triple LI model, which has been consolidated, where universities, the state, and the education system in general are become a three-party. And finally, in the slides, and if you don't want to see them, we show the experience of the University of Pelayo, how they manage knowledge at the moment. Before I continue, I want to tell you another thing. We have, as part of instruction, two aspects. We have the way of doing our management, which is the know-how of institutions, and another element is the knowledge of what is done with knowledge. The truth is that this is knowledge elevated to the square. Every institution has a knowledge about its product, its processes, and even our funding is devoted, and our raw material is always knowledge. So I would call it knowledge elevated to the square. Well, I have said that the first portion was what I think knowledge is. It has been extracted from some articles. I think that we need to reflect. You need to reflect upon this because it's important, and also because many times we're mixing the illusion with the beliefs, and I think that it was convenient to put it as a scheme. Having said this, I think that it is very important to reflect these ideas and the role, as you saw in the last document, that new technologies of communication play along this knowledge management issue. The following item is how knowledge is originated. where it starts. And particularly here, one thing. The other important thing is how it is generated, extremely important. It seems to me extremely important because many times we forget this. We're mixing all this, and I think that transmitting it is not the same. And then the possibilities that knowledge has, and using more modern items, tacit knowledge, which is the one that doesn't show any results as a personal internalization, and explicit, which is what everyone sees and what we project to the outside. And I also consider that very important. And in the next slide, you will see Neo-Nacker's model, and you can see how we go from a knowledge that is a portion of socialization of knowledge. We move into the externalization. At another point, we move into the combination of this and its application, and then the new experiences that are incorporated to knowledge. And then we bring it in, we internalize it. And all knowledge used to be static, but modern knowledge is growing constantly, and I think that universities have not come to realize this issue. There's nothing more important in managing knowledge than have an interaction, and we have the intent of doing it with this platform of 2.0. There's obviously new bibliography, and what we have now is an entire community, a society as a whole that has participated in the generation of new knowledge, which is incorporated in the next course. So these are methods that are escaping ourselves, and we're left with things that have less meaning. For example, I consider it very important university knowledge, but it's important to understand how knowledge is structured, how knowledge got there. And finally, in these general terms, let us not forget that knowledge is sharing. And Humboldt already, who was a precursor in these topics, said that the only thing that one doesn't lose it when it shares it is knowledge, but it's rather increase. And this is a very important thing. This law that is very well known says that if there's no way of sharing knowledge, knowledge is blocked. Well, along these lines, I wanted to tell you that the truth is that in this program we are an entity that is collaborating with AOHE. This is the first participation in this context, but I think that it's spectacular, and it's a moment to say it. We're talking about quality, we're talking about management, knowledge management, and the perspective from universities, something that we don't do. Universities create diploma, as the person who spoke before me said, but they do not do prospective work. What does this mean? Well, do we renew? Do we change them? Do we do a trial and error essay? And I don't think we do it. And this university of the 21st century is an important issue. It's a program that goes inside campus, and I'm talking about knowledge management, and it depends on who is managing that knowledge. I think that knowledge management in the entrepreneurial sector is a little different, because if we think that there's an entrepreneurial sector, and if we're forming entrepreneurs, things are not very clear. We need to incorporate it into our own university assets. And in this sense, it seems to me that we need to share that portion, which is management in itself, to share everything that has to do with management. That is, the individuals that participate in management should share that knowledge and should make it available to others. Those manuals, those books should not remain in the university. And in this sense, we find ourselves with people that are working on this topic. What are the initiatives? The initiatives are known under the label of knowledge management at universities. Well, everybody speaks about general access and dissemination of information, administration issues, the most frequent questions, the academic process, automation, etc. All of this we're doing, and management of knowledge is very important, of course. And then we, of course, have teaching and learning, the virtual classrooms with more or less fortune in their development. I think that it's all right to do it, and as long as we are smart enough to teach the lesson in class and then teach it virtually, I think that it has to be enriched. And I think that we already hear about some classrooms 2.0, which are somewhere around there, and it's extremely important. And to do research, it is clear that we have decided to share the library, share the information, and of course, establish research networks and all this generation of companies and the spin-off companies. And I always say that university people end up in the directive places of universities by usage. There's no school for principals, there's no school for deans, and the truth of the matter is that many times what we do, and I, who have been for a few years in this since 1978-79, have always been in university management, and now I have lost the teaching portion, but I hope to recuperate it soon. And you start to learn in under a trial and error process. And when you see one experience, you bring it back to your mind. I think that that's pure knowledge. I think that the forming of the university staff should be done more. As in Spain, they have to do with success. Now, let's move to another topic. Before I move on, I would tell you that in a book that is under the responsibility of Telefónica, they set forth the processes of what will be the digitalization of university systems for a digital university. We in Santander held a course that the University 2.0 teaches. It was an attempt to see how this issue was moving along. The one thing that is clear is that the university professor, when it has to share this knowledge in the network, there's people who resist themselves, there's problems in the dissemination of education. But if we talk about research, since I have some information, I can make them available to all of you. I am a geologist, I always work in mining, and there's a book that was issued by the Einstein Foundation that speaks about how to help a mining company in their problem, and the results of that problem is put in the network, and then they see who takes advantage of that and how. If we had said this 30 years ago or 20 years ago, it was really unthinkable, because some gentlemen are spending money and making a research, and then they disseminate the information for the entire world, and then the world is free to interpret that information. If that is not a success, well, let me know. But the important thing, it's important to understand that this is changing, and this in research is going to be revolutionary, and new generations are not aware of all this. Along the universities, we have people like myself who are over 60, and that are speaking about an element that affects the young, the digital generation, that have very different habits than to ours. We are digital immigrants, they're digital natives, and we're speaking or attempting to speak to them. And I think that in the Bologna process, the same thing happened. We were speaking to students, not with the students, because even in public universities and in the privates even more, they're making tele diaries for digital people. Why? Because this is the sappy knowledge. They are not able to sit down and listen 20 minutes. Most of them would leave the classroom, and this is something that is clear. And this is quite important as well. So, since they have always told us that we are responsible for economic growth of countries, of their well-being, it seems important to me. It is true that we must be born and think, but we should not forget that there is a society behind us. It's not important only to have high productivity, high competitiveness, but we have to think about sustainable development. I think that any rational person has to think along these lines, and of course the psychosocial elements that have to be added. But by all means, the World Economic Forum is putting forward these issues, and there you haven't read the ones that are more important and that affect us deeply. And I say that they affect us deeply in value and weight. 32% of the weight is global competitiveness. It's higher education and training, it's technological preparation and innovation. And this seems to be important because it's a great responsibility. You can say that a country that doesn't have a good university, everything is working poorly. I think that this is limiting primary education. Is important, yes. University education plays an important role, because here you have the people who are going to train the primary kids. what is demanded from us? Well, in higher education, they're demanding employment, employment, and employment, quality, access to internet, and the truth of the matter is that a little more. They asking us, and I always remember this bridge model implemented by Margaret Thatcher in the British universities, and the first thing that came to mind was employment. How much training was useful towards employment, and then the second element was the remuneration of an employee with university degree versus without university education. And in this organic system, this was important. I'm not saying this is right, but I'm saying it's a way of measuring, and this I'm going to repeat this again. And what are universities? Well, this is a very passionate topic, and I would love to give you a conference on this topic because I like very much the history of universities. We have the study. Universities are born as general study areas, a place where you disseminate knowledge, then you debate knowledge, then you have very close margins, and then you have universities that do research until the Renaissance period. In the Renaissance period, there's basically research related to human beings, to the perception of particularly social science and natural sciences. So a university from the Napoleonic era, and I'm speaking of our universities as Napoleonic universities, it's a university that is born in opposition to the former universities. These are the higher schools in France, the technical higher schools in Spain, and the attempt is to do a different way of teaching. This university that reaches almost to our days, the truth of the matter is it is a university that has been dignified in its more important aspects because it is still working in spite of its many defects. Then we have the German university of the Humboldt type. I think this is the one that invested, that does research as a regular activity, and it achieves spectacular results. You probably remember at the beginnings of the 19th and 20th century, many universities were in the German style, such as Austria, Germany, and even some universities of the Netherlands that adopted this model that we have all pointed to. And I would say that our universities around 1933, the University of Pelayo was again working under this Humboldt principle. The important thing is knowledge and the figure of the researcher that transmits his or her knowledge. How is the Cardinal Newman? Well, Pontifical universities, Jesuit universities, as you know, one is a professor of Oxford that became Catholic, and then he became a cardinal, and I think that he's going to be canonized. So it's a way of forming technical people with higher levels, higher ethical levels, and as the training that begins at all these levels. What has happened particularly after Second World War in the United States? Well, things changed radically, and we begin to have this functional entrepreneurial universities. I don't even know how to call them, he says. But the university becomes a big challenge. They compete for the best teachers, for the best projects, for the best students. They attract the best students. They speak about benchmarking, ranking, campus foundations, sponsorship, technological part. And we haven't said it, but everybody continues emulating this. I'm speaking since 1939. This is the first time that IBM works shoulder to shoulder with the university. This model, this house where we are, participates of this model, and I think it's a good model. And in Spain, and I can tell you that many of the societies have turned in this direction without saying they have done it. Some people have remained in the Humboldt period, and others continue being Napoleonic. And then they have 15 assignments, 15 courses, and then you have a title. And it's a model that is there. It's a model that is in the mind of people. So what about the universities of the future? Well, we're talking about corporate universities. This is just emerging. Companies have decided, and I have a chart in the end. Maybe I won't tell the story. You can see it. I have the know-how. It's sufficient, and I will train my own people. And I will look for supplementarity in maybe languages, information technology, but I want you to follow my program. And there you have large consultants that have done work with corporate universities in an incredible fashion, but they have more demand than any formal, the normal university. In regards to the universities of the 21st century, these corporate universities, and then those that don't have a set of teachers that acquire the teaching material. And it's very curious, and I just put it there. In the United Kingdom, type of assessment has been done recently, and this year they see the main problems: employment for graduate students, accreditation of quality, organization of teachers and students, knowledge networks, opportunities for NTs, innovation. Innovation is a very fundamental topic. The truth of the matter is that I want to say that a bad concept has been assigned to innovation. However, innovation means renewal, and I think that it has moved from the development stage to the commercial stage. It can be done under viable economic conditions, otherwise it's not innovation. The rest of it is research, or prototypes, but innovation is this. And another important thing, there's no reason for which it would be limited to only science and technology. What about marketing? What about financing? What about economics? Innovating in the methodology of science. And you can make innovation in many fields. And the truth is that I have mentioned a very conflictive issue. It's the intellectual property issues, and everybody knows this problem. 5 minutes, okay? Generous 5 minutes or not? Well, I think that this topic has been broken up by the network. There you have a web page that I would like you to consult. Uh, if you don't like it, you can come out. These people will put in touch with companies that have certain needs and maybe solutions on the other end. They are in the network, and if you reach an agreement, then some money is gone from one place to another, and then nothing has happened with that. Knowledge does not belong to the institution where a person is generating it. Neither the company needs to have a research department. But be clear in regards to this, the problems are in the network, and this is a big secret, and this really breaks what has been done in regards to intellectual property. The system works in this way. The system is quite complicated. It has become quite complicated. We have this type of instrument, execution instruments for research instruments, the channel, the demand and development, promoter instruments, instruments of interface, and approach, and financial instruments, amongst them risk capital, which is clearly needed. And here we have different modules. We have consortiums of universities when they are isolated. This is under the ISIS innovation. Then we have international national centers. These are generally multidisciplinary in research, and there are many others. It's not just a university that has the patrimony of research. This is an important problem. We don't have patrimony either in education or in research. And here you can see the large technological infrastructure and many other things. Then we have promoters as instruments, and if you work with the financial groups, you have to take into account the relationship capital risk. And then in an interface, I have put there some additional instruments, and these are points where the company meets with the university, and research can target a specific needs of businesses. And these are organizations that are doing targeted research. Financial instruments, well, there are many ways of funding research, mainly through non-reimbursable loans, risk capital, business angels as they're called, consortiums, the buying of technology. The buying of technology is not by everyone, and this is a North American idea. The movie The Aviator is a good example to see this. And you can see basically you have a set of airplanes with different characteristics, and then you're making everybody to participate there. And the universities obviously and researchers have an opportunity to do so, and they have already ensured the first 500, and then they put more and more people in the market, and they generate a synergy that is really incredible. So the truth is that on the other development and innovation are important, and we need to encourage them. And I see a series of advantages in their stimulation, and therefore advantages that universities can derive and make their own. And here you have the simple helix is the most modern mechanism which exists to interpret the very complex relationships which exist between public administration, which is the one that should be channeling this, the enterprise and the universities. All these models basically represent the same. The one on the left is from the Catalonia scientific body. The one on the right, I think, is Abelarde, and the other one is the original in the work of Leviton. It seems to me that this is an important problem, and I think that through funding agencies for research, agencies that do prospection funding and follow-up and research, be able to do with this very important task. I don't think that you can fund a project that has an immediate economic interest, and therefore it can be funded through the conventional channels compared to a project that is far away but is of interest in the future. I think that you have to analyze these issues, and I think that the model is extremely complex, and you have to bear that in mind. Well, this is basically my idea. The idea that I like is that all of this is extremely complicated. It's becoming more complicated, especially in regards to knowledge management, and I think that it is a pity that at the level of the European Union this has been dispatched under two concepts in the European space regarding higher education and the European space that has to do with research. And I think that it is a pity when we talk about the European Union and research. They spend approximately 1/3 of what the North American friends spend in 1 year. The relationship is 6 years, 1 year, and 1/3. So I don't think there's much to think about, because the gap is going to continue growing. Having said this, our university is a university where we attempt to do mainly education issues, training issues. We have mounted a series of things that we could show you, and you're talking about an award for communicating all of this, which seems to be important. We 2.0 is giving us an important space to disseminate, share, and generate knowledge. It's creating a kind of a social group around some important topics, and I think that also it's working very well. People are communicating with it, and we have the initial idea, professor students. The one of 2.0 is this one. The professor is in some place in the network, but the whole mass, the whole group that is sharing knowledge is around and collaborating in the generation of new knowledge. This allows, for example, we have discontinuous courses that from left to right you can see very perfectly how a course is born, and what happens is that after a certain period of time you can add material on the network. Then during the execution of the course in the stage B, what you do is leave the material that has been shared be transferred totally to the network, and then the group reassumes the discussion. These are basically some of the tools. We have one of these models called the Living UIMP 2.0, and the offer and the quality of material can be improved year after year. We are already in Santander by Telewin, and we have our Minister of Education, and there were 30,000 connections, direct connections, and these are things that the university cannot remain foreign to it. It was our intent to prove it, and next year we will do it with many other courses. We have digital libraries, for example. This is one that has a lot of history, and it's working through YouTube. It's important to me. I think that this year we will be working in what will be, and we have already for this year, the Web 2.0 plus world, which is, in my opinion, W square. This was the year of creativity and innovation. And setting aside a few of these things, I think it's important to show you this slide. In the European Union, they have come to realize the permanent learning, which is important. The schools and universities where you can study and debate, that the places of work be learning places, to foster a cultural sector. All those things are important because they're telling us what the society is asking from universities, because if we're always with internal references, we will never see the outside world. And this is what this is a Spanish program, Campus Excellence, that started yesterday, and the attempt here is to innovate university concepts. I think that it is an interesting program, and you can see it at the webpage. And this is talking about title granting, and I think there's a marvel on this. In collaboration with IBM, we are working in services, sciences, management, and engineering. Mainly in services, 80% of what is done around the world in the economies of 70, 80 in developed countries are services. In the less developed countries, it's 30, 40. But it's very curious that there's nothing in this regard, maybe only the link between science and technology, sociology, economy, and many other things. But the truth of the matter, it seems to me, and I always like to break through with new ideas and change the heading. We have headings that are extremely impressive. For example, here, uh, some of these are impacting. This is the image of the new enterprise. The future of new enterprises is not with ideas of the 19th or 20th centuries. They have to adopt ideas from the 21st century and what we think that it will be like in 2030. Companies will be able to take the option of being just staff groups, where a group decides what is done and the rest is subcontracted. Or this can be companies that are highly committed with the training of its own personnel, and particularly companies that have a high level of sensitivity for what is and could be so important, sustainable development and more or less social activities. And then evidently there will be others that will continue being the classical companies. I think this is also important because we're changing along these lines, and it's important to keep it in mind. Nothing else, but as a matter of conclusion, this system is not only mandatory, but it's always permanent. We will always be happy. And that was told by one of my teachers, and the lady that spoke before me also said this. The truth is that there's one thing, and I think that we should add importance to the teaching methodology, and we should have to look for new teaching methods, because until about 10 years ago, it was basically the same as the general studies of the 12th or 13th century, the same. A gentleman went up to the podium, and that's what we teachers do, read a text, argue the text, and then the text was debated. There was nothing but that, and I think that we need to change that. I don't need to say this in everything else. It's important, particularly because we have a commitment, and I'm concluding, a commitment before society. Society is asking us for a lot. Sometimes they are silently asking for a lot, but we have to fulfill our responsibility, and we have to see ahead of time the future of our organizations of the world itself, because the world is in our hands, and we have to work with the students, work with teachers and the management staff of universities, so that they're conscious of this reality, and so that they're permanently looking for new ways, allowing the production system to be efficient. This is what I would like to see. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Salvador Ordóñez, for your presentation.